Hey there, tiktakers. The new year is coming on strong, and honestly, we couldn't wait for it. And that's why we can't leave our good habits behind, such as bringing together some of our favorite scary videos. How about a throwback to our horrible Longhorse, Cartoon Cat, Siren Head, and Lighthead? Let's go for it! It was the middle of the night and I was driving my car through a poorly lit country road. My wife was sitting in the front seat and my two children were in the back. We were driving back home after visiting my in-laws in their country house. We should have left earlier and the children should have been in bed by now, but time just flew by. In fact, I was the only one awake and everyone else was sleeping in their seats. I also started to feel sleepy, so I tried to focus. I could not get distracted. That was a dangerous road with some really sharp turns after all. And to make matters worse, a storm was starting to break out and the wind started to shake the tree branches. I could only think about finally getting home and resting in my bed. I thought about putting some music on or roll down the window to wake myself up, but that would wake up the others, so I tried to just focus on the road. But I couldn't help it. My eyelids felt heavy and my eyes were closing. I thought that nothing bad would happen if I rested my eyes for just an instant. There were barely any other cars on the road and it was unlikely an animal would cross at this hour. My hands were driving automatically, my mind started to get foggy and I entered a semi-conscious state. I have no idea if what happened next was real or a product of my imagination. When I made a turn on the next curve, I could distinguish in the darkness a strange figure by the side of the road. Some sort of animal, but not a normal one. At first I thought it was a skeleton of a horse, since I could distinguish a horse's skull in that figure. However, I realized the skull had a long and thin neck coming out of it, like a snake, which seemed to have no end. Suddenly, the creature raised its head and looked directly at me. The shock scared me so much that I lost control of the car, getting off-road and hit in a tree. I then woke up in a shock and realized I was just dreaming. I fully regained consciousness, seeing I was still driving my car and my family was still asleep. Fortunately, the shock kept me awake, but I couldn't stop thinking about the meaning of that vision and of such a strange and creepy creature. Then I heard the voice of my youngest son behind me. He insisted that we left the road and went back to Grandpa and Grandma's house. I told him we couldn't go back since we would be arriving to the city pretty soon, but he kept insisting, saying that we had to go back or something terrible would happen to us, and that a Longhorse just stole him so. Surprised by such a coincidence with my dream, I asked him where the Longhorse was and he pointed to one side of the road. And there it was again, with its sinister skull without a jaw and its infinite neck producing chilling crackles. I immediately stepped on the brake, turned the car around, and drove back to my in-laws' house. Through the rearview mirror, I could see how that unnerving creature was looking directly at us. My wife woke up and alarmed to ask me why we were turning back. Covered in a cold sweat, I didn't even know how to respond. And I just said that the weather was terrible and the road was very dangerous right now, so it was best for us to go back and spend the night at her parents' house. She thought that was strange, but when she saw how scared I was, she just complied. The next morning, my youngest son and I were eating breakfast in silence, still in shock by what had happened the night before. On TV, a news story broke out saying that there was an accident in the same road we were driving on. A tree fell due to the bad weather, blocking the way, and a driver who had no time to react crashed with it. Everyone in the car died. My son and I looked at each other, horrified, when we realized how close we were to a certain death. Longhorse is another one of the creatures out of the mind of the artist Trevor Henderson, creator of Siren Head and Cartoon Cat. Its head is a horse skull without a jaw, which is connected to a long and pale neck with some strands of black mane. Longhorse's neck is completely flexible, it's infinitely large and produces crackles when it contorts and moves in every way imaginable. Curiously, it is said that it also exudes a smell of cinnamon and that it enjoys offerings such as apples and small pets. It first appeared on August 24th, 2018 when Trevor published an unnerving image of it in his social media accounts. Along with the description, "I had that dream again about the horse on the stairs." Shortly after, he uploaded another image, this time in the suburbs of a city, with the following text. "Every night, it curved into his dreams, folded into view from around impossible corners. One gaping socket always on him as it silently glided. He thought putting some distance between the thing he'd found in the attic and himself might help, but no, it met him on the road." A third time appeared a later time. An ancient cave painting which suggested that Longhorse could have existed since ancient times, and that despite its creepy appearance, it could be a being who protects humans, who warns them about any danger or disaster that could be getting close to so they can avoid it. Thus, Longhorse has the power to predict the future and can also teleport to whatever it wants. Its infinite neck is capable of bending the laws of physics, defy gravity, and contort to unthinkable extremes. Trevor himself mentioned one time that if you look directly at Longhorse's neck for a while, the neck will wither and fade to dust, but Longhorse will not be affected. This is the only creature created by Trevor Henderson which isn't evil and doesn't try to harm others. Which is why many speculate that Siren Head and Longhorse are arch enemies, due to their diametrically opposed ways of looking at humanity. Despite this, we bet most of you wouldn't like to ever encounter this bad omen of a creature, would you? It started to get dark, and I was just getting started with my work when a notification on my computer startled me. It was an email from Phil, one of my best friends. He would always bombard me with dumb things he found on the internet. I thought about not opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "You gotta see this," said the title. I smiled. Coming from Phil, it could be anything, but this enthusiasm caught my attention. I clicked the email and a photograph appeared. It was a pretty disturbing image of an abandoned place, messy and very gloomy. There was an open door, and from there a strange black creature was peeking out. It looked like some kind of dog, although its limbs were too long, and for some reason he had a hand that made you think of old cartoons. I didn't understand why Phil sent me that picture, and he didn't give any explanation or context in the email either. I couldn't help but shiver. That image was unsettling, precisely because it just didn't make any sense. But it was just a simple image anyway, so I thought nothing more of it and continued working. A few minutes later, I got another notification. It was Phil again. I frowned. I didn't want to see any more of his images now that I was focused on my work, but maybe he would provide an explanation this time around. Curiosity once again got the better of me, and I opened the email. This time, the message had no title. In fact, the email only had one photo where you could see the same strange creature in a very dim place. In the lower part of the photo, I could distinguish part of its head, elongated and stretched, on the ground. I could see the attributes of that creature a bit better, and instead of a dog, it looked more like a sinister cat. I would definitely stop opening any more emails from Phil now. They not only distracted me, but also made me feel uneasy. I guess he thought they were amusing, since he kept sending me more and more messages that I decided not to open. It was almost midnight now. I had 2 more hours of work left, so I got up from my desk and went to make a coffee. I was in the kitchen when I heard the sound of yet another notification. Isn't Phil getting tired of this? I ignored it and poured coffee in my cup. But then I started hearing an incessant stream of notifications coming from my computer, one after the other. And that's when I ran out of patience. Angry and annoyed, I went back to the living room to see my computer screen, and what I saw left me shocked. I had dozens of messages in my inbox, but none of them were from Phil. They were all sent from the same account, @CartoonCat. They looked like spam, and it was very clear I should have ignored them, but yet again, curiosity got the better of me. There was no message body in any of the emails, just a series of photos of the same strange creature as before. In the first one, the strange monster was standing up in front of a house with its mouth open and a disturbing expression in its eyes. The second photo looked darker, but you could still make out its demonic expression and its mouth full of blood. And then I saw the last photo. I was frozen in shock. No, it just couldn't be. I could recognize that place perfectly. It was my own living room and the strange cat was peeking through the door. My own door. Its menacing face was looking at me with a violent and macabre expression. A drop of sweat slid through my forehead, and I slowly turned my head. And there it was. Its elongated figure stood up in the middle of the darkness of the hallway. It opened its mouth slowly, showing its teeth. I was absolutely frozen in fear as that monster let out an infernal growl. The last thing I remember was seeing it plunge towards me, and then everything went dark. Do you remember Siren Head, TikTakers? Well, just like him, Cartoon Cat is another one of the multiple creatures created by Trevor Henderson. Its first depiction appeared in August of 2018, and although it may look like a normal cartoon, in reality, it's one of the most dangerous creepypastas created by this author. This character is inspired by the famous Felix the Cat, although Cartoon Cat is way more sinister. It is a giant black cat with a malleable body, long limbs, and a terrifying smile. It's very quick and very resilient. It is believed it can manipulate time and space as it pleases, and that's why at some point it made the jump from fiction to the real world. It can change its shape to confuse its victims, who it kidnaps and are never heard from again. It is said that it lives in an abandoned mall, and that its twisted smile is the last thing many see before it comes out of the photos and visits us in the real world. Nobody knows how to defeat it, although there are many theories out there. What is yours, TikTakers? What would you do if you receive an email from Cartoon Cat? It was a pleasant summer evening, and the very last rays of sunshine were falling on the forest. Eric got off the car, grabbed his flashlight and his camera, and felt how the animals responded to his presence. Crickets, owls, and who knows what other creatures. But that's what was exciting about it, not knowing what he would photograph that night. He was filled with excitement as that was the first time he would go out to the forest in a very long time. Even though it was pretty close to his house, he had been way too busy working to visit it until now. Once his feet touched the soft ground of the place, he immediately felt the enthusiasm of taking pictures again. He walked through the trail, getting more and more deeply into the dense forest. He wasn't scared, as he had done this many times before. He walked quietly, being careful about not making noise with his steps, and stopped when in the distance he heard the murmur of an animal. An owl, perhaps? What a good start! He kept walking towards the source of the murmur, which started to get louder. But Eric's enthusiasm started to wane the closer he got, as he started to realize that sound wasn't coming from an owl. It was way too grating. Suddenly, silence took over, and even the bugs seemed to stop making sounds. That point of the forest was denser and darker than any other, and Eric started to get nervous. A small drop of sweat ran over his forehead while his eyes fixated on a very dark point in the bushes. Suddenly, a strange and thunderous noise started up, and it was much louder than the previous one. That noise seemed to be getting deep into Eric's ears, stopping him from thinking clearly, and it was almost hurting him too. He saw how a few meters from him, the top of the trees started to shake violently. He then felt footsteps getting closer and closer. In a glimpse of lucidity, Eric took out his camera, activated the flash, pointed it to the focus of all that commotion, and took a picture. He didn't see anything strange on the camera's screen, and the flash didn't produce much light either. The thunderous noise stopped once again, as well as those strange steps. In their place, he started to hear what seemed to be a radio signal. Eric thought that was weird, but also felt relieved as it seemed he wasn't alone. Maybe a neighbor decided to have a walk in the forest, he thought. He lowered his camera and got closer. He advanced a couple of meters, getting closer and closer. He took out his flashlight, and even though he pointed it everywhere, he didn't see anybody. The sound stopped once again, and something in front of him startled him. A figure as tall as the nearby trees, firmly moving towards him. Eric, filled with panic, ran quickly to hide in the bushes. He pointed his flashlight, and he saw it. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In front of him was an extremely tall and thin figure. Its skin had an unpleasant texture and color, and you could almost see its skeleton through it. It seemed to have wires around its neck, but the most terrifying thing about this creature was without a doubt its head. It had two metallic sirens, and although it seemed to not have eyes, it did have a mouth with sharp and pointy teeth, as well as a long serpent-like tongue. Without thinking it twice, Eric grabbed his camera and took a picture. He turned pale when this monster started to make strange noises again. The sounds blended with each other, and although Eric thought he heard human voices among those sounds, he couldn't understand them. He had no time to waste. Whatever that thing was, he had to escape now. He turned around and started running, but the monster found him. The noise coming from the monster's sirens got louder and louder as it chased Eric. He managed to get into his car, but it was too late as the creature was only a few steps from it. The noise was so loud that it became unbearable, and soon enough Eric felt his eardrums burst and started getting clogged by the bleeding. The creature advanced towards him and destroyed Eric's soft tissues with a blast of its otherworldly noise. Eric fell to the ground, noticing the blood in his eyes and gums, knowing that was his end. But, to his surprise, the monster left him there, dying. It then headed downhill, where it had an entire town ready to listen to its macabre music. Siren Head is a fictional creature created by the Canadian artist Trevor Henderson, author of other monsters such as Cartoon Cat and Longhorse. Siren Head is a 12-meter tall skeletal creature with disproportionately long limbs and mummified skin. Its head is composed of two huge sirens capable of imitating radio transmissions, human voices, and other sounds. Inside of them, there is a mouth with a long tongue it uses to gobble up its victims. This creature is usually not spotted in populated areas, but in more remote places. It hides itself very well among the trees, and that's why many times people don't notice its presence. It attracts its victims using the sounds it emits, and then kills them using extremely loud sound blasts. All of Siren Head's victims have been found bleeding from the ears, eyes, and gums. And it spends most of the time standing still, but when it needs to, it can move very fast. Siren Head shows a certain degree of intelligence, and some suspect it might be the last creature of its kind. It recently started killing bigger groups of humans, which shows that its thirst for blood is ever increasing. So be very careful when going out to the forest tiktakers, and be aware of anything you might be hearing, or Siren Head could get you too. Carlos, the police inspector, was walking in circles in his office. He had been brooding on it for days and just couldn't find any logical solution. It was 13 people already. 13 victims who had disappeared under strange circumstances in the last month. That was a very peaceful city with just a few inhabitants. For now, the only factor all the cases had in common was that all the victims had disappeared in very isolated places and very late at night. Moreover, in all the cases studied to date, there were no signs of fingerprints, nor any other clue that could help the police find the victims. It was a very frustrating situation, and things were only getting worse. Now, people avoided getting out of their houses out of fear. As always, the local newspaper didn't help in diffusing the panic. Every day, they came up with new theories about what could explain those strange disappearances. At first, Carlos didn't look at them, but over the course of the days, his desperation was so high that even those theories started to become interesting. He just didn't know what to do. The affected areas had no security cameras. They were all dirt roads or parks away from downtown, with no businesses nor banks nearby that could have security systems. He had all of his men taking double shifts to patrol the entire city, but still nothing. They considered installing video surveillance systems, but there were not enough funds for it. Moreover, it was completely unpredictable where the next kidnapping would take place. And yes, at that point, the police were sure that the kidnappings would continue. Work was accumulating, as well as the lack of sleep. And despite that, Carlos could barely sleep a couple of hours on his free nights. And it was precisely in one of them when he got in his car and went out for a drive. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular, and his mind was still restless. At least by going out, he could be able to report anything in case he saw anything suspicious. However, he never expected to bump into that. He was driving up a road by the side of the Western Park when he saw lights in the distance. At first, he thought it was a product of his exhaustion. He was probably in a different area, and those lights would end up being just a block of houses. But it was strange. He was relatively near his house, and he was familiar with those roads. As he approached the lights, he started to notice a strange buzz within his ears. He also started to feel weird. He had never felt like this before. He kept driving, and when he looked at the last hill, he stopped. There were no public lights there, but he could still see that different lamps had been placed there. He was surprised by their height. He had never seen lamps like those before. He laughed at himself for getting scared. Surely the municipal government had placed them there recently. However, he was still feeling strange, so he stopped and got out of his car to take a breath. The buzz in his ears was getting more and more intense, and it felt like his head was about to explode. He tried to walk for a bit to help ease the tension and the pain, but they were just getting worse. And when he was about to faint, he leaned on one of those lamps. His body was carbonized in seconds as he had bumped into a light head. He had solved the mystery, but it was too late to save his neighbors. The next day, all the newspapers in the city had the news on the first page. The head police inspector in charge of investigating the disappearances had disappeared too. Lighthead, or Headlight, is a fictional creature created by the Canadian artist Trevor Henderson, author of other monsters such as Siren Head, Cartoon Cat, and Longhorse. Not much is known about this strange being, but from what we have discovered on the internet, they have humanoid shapes, and instead of a head, they have lights. Their extremities really make them stand out since they're extremely large in proportion to their bodies. They can be either male or female. The males are 3 to 4 meters tall, while the females can measure more than 6 meters. The skin of a lighthead is gray, and its thickness allows them to withstand bites or scratches from other aggressive creatures. Some say that their skin is made of the strongest material in the entire planet. Moreover, lightheads also produce a chemical repellent as a defense mechanism. That makes them have a very particular smell, which is different between the males and females. That smell is intensified when they're in the middle of a fight or feel danger. Surely many of you have seen our video about Siren Head and might think that they're very similar. Many sources online claim that the Lightheads were created by Siren Head as an army to overthrow the Earth. Siren Head would control their minds, and they, with their immeasurable force, would do the rest. Also, the Lightheads not only inherited Siren Head's horrible sounds, but also improved on them since they can emit a series of vibrations undetectable but deadly to all humans. Other sources also claim that the Lightheads can not only produce earthquakes and tsunamis, but also have the ability of driving meteorites to Earth in order to destroy us all. If that happens to be true, then that means we would be dealing with an invincible monster. Are you scared yet, TikTakers? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!